Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Stock market crash tied to Trump tariffs. One sure bet with the U.S. stock market is that investors hate uncertainty. And with the wild first 6 weeks of the Trump administration, change has been coming fast and furious. At this time, the market has lost at least $4 trillion in market value. First, much of this is what I call funny money, here today, gone tomorrow. Many of the stocks involved traded far beyond the old-fashioned benchmark of a modest multiple of earnings versus share price. Second, I have witnessed dramatic drops in the market in the past. I recall early in 2009, the market indexes dropped in half. That was a major recession. Third, most financial advisors will counsel that the best thing to do if your stocks are down is to sit tight and wait for things to stabilize. In 2009, like most people, the little bit that I had in the stock market took a major hit. But I stood firm, and by 2012, I was back even, and later still things were pretty good. Naturally, as we go to press, the stock market is having a good day. I also hear the talking heads saying that some of the stocks that have had a big hit recently are buying opportunities. Of course, stocks are not for everybody, and this is not a finance show. So I do not ever give anyone, even family members, financial advice. Well, why is the market shaking? In this case, the blame has been placed on the tariff war that Trump has started. As I have previously commented, I do not like his approach, which I would label a sledgehammer approach. I would start by again objecting to the big tariff assessments against Mexico and Canada. He has held some of that in abeyance, but it's not clear where this is going with regard to our two neighbors. In contrast, I'm totally on board with tariffs against our clear archenemy, China, and the European Union and India, which have been taking advantage of the U.S. for decades. Speaking of slow learners, the EU announced another $28 billion in retaliatory tariffs against the USA. I predict that this will not end well for Europe if the greedy scum there do not get on board. Europe is also being told to carry a larger share of its military responsibilities by the Trump administration. The focus is on steel and aluminum tariffs just introduced by Trump. I do believe the USA should be a leader in producing its own steel and aluminum. Not sure why we would need to import it when this is a highly capital-intensive industry, not labor-intensive. Note that the UK, which is no longer part of the EU, has said it will stand pat for now. I believe this is a very good move. Canada, also not so smart, is threatening electric supplies to several northern states and now has added $21 billion in retaliatory tariffs. I predict this will end even more badly for Canada than the EU. Dumb as the stump, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will transition to new PM Mark Carney. Let's see if he does any better. This is classic Trump. Unfortunately, he has a decent concept, but the implementation is sloppy. I agree with the fact that we need to say no more Mr. Nice Guy. But how you get this mess untangled has been bungled so far. Specifically, I would like to have met with Canadian reps and reviewed the tariffs between the two countries. There's no question that Canada is off track and there needs to be a correction. Same for these other countries. As I understand it, the largest economy on earth has a government that periodically runs out of money. Then there are emergency resolutions to keep it funded for some period of time. This mess is due to decades of failure by both parties to put the USA on proper financial footing. I absolutely hate seeing Congress pass continuing resolutions, acronym CR, to keep the government open instead of doing the right thing. That right thing, of course, is balancing income and expenses and getting the country on the right track. Basically, the Dems handed Demen and Joe a pass when they passed the last CR continuing resolution for the budget several months ago. Trump, as he tries to reform a broken system, faced the challenge of passing yet another continuing resolution just to get by so he has some running room. Congressman Thomas Massie did not vote for it in the House since he is demanding cuts. I agree with huge cuts, but now is not the right day to do this. Getting your ducks in a row and building toward a better government is key. So Speaker Johnson got it through the House. Passing it in the Senate was even tighter. It took Chucky Schumer and another Democrat to pass the CR in the Senate. So it passed 54-46 with only one Republican, Rand Paul, not voting for it. Rand Paul, I know, is another hardcore conservative like yours truly, and doesn't want us to keep signing off on bloated, ridiculous government budgets. Of course, the majority of the anti-American scum known as Democrats did not vote for the CR in the House or the Senate, and in fact, they're mad at good old Chucky. It's critical that we make mega cuts in the budget. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm not sure how a balanced bill will be passed in either house at this time, so more to come, folks. Days of reckoning for some universities. The government announced it was suspending all $400 million earmarked for Columbia University for failing to deal with anti-Semitism on campus. I completely agree with this approach. By the way, this Ivy is rich and can afford to run without Fed money, but I predict they will cry and whine. Harvard has not been cut yet, but they just announced a hiring freeze, blaming uncertainty. Harvard has enough money to run forever without additional funds, but will also try to cry and whine. Note, even private donations have been threatened due to the woke and anti-Semitic attitudes on these campuses. I support cutting that support as well. The day of reckoning may finally have arrived. Now, the Department of Education Civil Rights Office has announced it will investigate 60 universities for anti-Semitism. Well, it's about time. The office is citing Title IX for the compliance standard under the new Education Secretary, Linda McMahon. Audited universities include the biggie Harvard, but even an elite smaller one like Middlebury College. Parallel to this, ICE is trying to deport Columbia grad student Mahmoud Khalil for his role in organizing pro-Palestinian protests. They want to revoke his green card. According to his page on Wikipedia, he has already completed his master's at Columbia. A press report noticed that this alleged terrorist supporter is married to an American citizen who is pregnant. Unfortunately, a liberal New York judge has blocked his deportation at this time. I hope that is quickly reversed by a higher court, if appropriate. I say appropriate since Khalil has apparently denied the more serious allegations against him. Parallel to this, the Department of Justice has opened a civil rights investigation against the whole University of California system, that's 10 campuses, to review anti-Semitism across those campuses. Walgreens taken private. Walgreens, along with its affiliated brands, Duane Reade and Boots, is a true household name in the U.S. However, a failure to keep up with the times and overexpansion of expensive retail locations has caught up with them. The chain has suffered in the stock market while closing many stores to stabilize its business model. In fact, while my local stores are still operating, I drove by a closed high-profile location this week. One article noted that Walgreens has been public for 100 years. The play is that a private equity firm, Sycamore Partners, will pay $11.45 a share in cash. Sycamore will then be responsible for the current debts and obligations of Walgreens. That could make the deal worth almost $24 billion. In previous shows, I have mentioned that CVS and Rite Aid have also been closing stores. Reports suggest that it's getting tougher for these big drug retailers to get reimbursed for some of the medications by insurers. I know Medicare and Medicaid are also getting more aggressive. I am familiar with the cost of some of the meds still under patent. You know, the ones with the silly and endless TV commercials. I've heard numbers like $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month, and even $20,000 a month. No wonder times are tough. I discussed this with a friend of mine who asked a key question. Why does anyone care about a public versus a private company? Hey, that's a good question. So I asked my favorite finance professor, and we agreed that for customers, it might not make that much of a difference. However, at the same time, locations may be reduced further and other changes to enhance profitability may follow. That could change the customer experience. The mystery of the attack on Doge. 90% of Americans in a recent poll believe the federal government is corrupt. The Dems are pushing hard and attacking Musk, but where will that lead them? Perhaps permanent minority status. Americans are overtaxed and underserved at every level of government. The day of reckoning for big government is here. Perhaps quietly missed in all this is that Musk cannot cut jobs. He can only identify waste. New Secretary of State Marco Rubio does have the authority, and he's announced a cancellation of 83% of future USAID contracts. Again, I cautiously endorse this since there's so much waste and abuse in what was supposed to be a good thing for those in need around the world. Rocket Mortgage will acquire Redfin. In an interesting marriage of real estate industry players, Rocket Mortgage will acquire the online real estate listing company Redfin for $1.75 billion. This is an all-stock deal. My regular audience knows that I'm a strong opponent of the rash of huge mergers. However, my cutoff is $10 billion. In addition, an all-stock deal looks more like a cooperative effort from a financial standpoint for both companies. Walgreens taken private. Walgreens, along with its affiliated brands, Duane Reade and Boots, is a true household name in the U.S. However, a failure to keep up with the times and overexpansion of expensive retail locations has caught up with them. The chain has suffered in the stock market while closing many stores to stabilize its business model. In fact, while my local stores are still operating, I drove by a closed high-profile location this week. One article noted that Walgreens has been public for 100 years. The play is that a private equity firm, Sycamore Partners, will pay $11.45 a share in cash. Sycamore will then be responsible for the current debts and obligations of Walgreens. That could make the deal worth almost $24 billion. In previous shows, I have mentioned that CVS and Rite Aid have also been closing stores. Reports suggest that it's getting tougher for these big drug retailers to get reimbursed for some of the medications by insurers. I know Medicare and Medicaid are also getting more aggressive. I am familiar with the cost of some of the meds still under patent. You know, the ones with the silly and endless TV commercials. I've heard numbers like $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month, and even $20,000 a month. No wonder times are tough. I discussed this with a friend of mine who asked a key question. Why does anyone care about a public versus a private company? Hey, that's a good question. So I asked my favorite finance professor, and we agreed that for customers, it might not make that much of a difference. However, at the same time, locations may be reduced further and other changes to enhance profitability may follow. That could change the customer experience. Housing market in turmoil. Reports are that the number of unsold new homes has surged in previously hot markets like Texas and other Sunbelt states. The challenge is that builders, when pressed, can discount their homes to get them moving, which then causes the buyers to move to the new home market and reduces demand in the resale market. Austin, Texas, up the road from Houston, is often mentioned lately as a tough, expensive market that is experiencing big issues. All I can say is that housing is expensive, but real estate taxes and insurance are an even bigger concern today. My regular audience knows that I have kind of a love-hate relationship with regard to the new HHS Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I'm a longtime supporter of well-established vaccines, and while he has changed his tune a bit, it still causes me a little heartburn. On the other hand, I'm a self-labeled health nut with a focus on protecting our children. I'm very happy that RFK Jr. is calling on the food industry to eliminate potentially harmful artificial food dyes. Earlier this year, prior to Kennedy's confirmation, the U.S. banned the artificial food dye known as red number 3, which has been shown to cause cancer in animals and is used in foods, dietary supplements, and oral medications. Let's get on with it. Let's get these poisons away from our food chain and our medical chain. Vandals targeting Tesla dealerships to protest Elon Musk. In fact, there are many Teslas here in Houston. I saw one with a bumper sticker that said, "I bought my Tesla before I knew who Elon Musk was." Moron. In a crazy twist, those who claim to support liberal causes, including the environment, are committing heinous damages, primarily at Tesla dealerships. There are reports of fires, graffiti, and worse. The most egregious report I've heard so far is there is a woman in Colorado who vandalized a Tesla dealership 4 times. Time to either send her to prison or to an insane asylum. What part of the fact that the U.S. government is the most wasteful operation in the history of the world do these fools not understand?
The next day, I called Guide Dogs for the Blind out in California, where I've gotten my dogs, and I spoke to a number of people there because we remembered that some of them at least had come and visited us in the World Trade Center. Among others, I spoke to Joanne Ritter, who was our public information officer at the time, and she said, "Do you mind if I write a little article about you?" And I didn't think about it long. I said, "Okay, why not?" And she said, "You know, you're going to be visible in the press. What TV show do you want to be on first?" And so I was very flip. I just said, "Larry King Live." 2 days later, I had the first of 5 interviews on Larry King Live. The media did get the story, and we got very visible. But I'm grateful for all of that. Karen and I decided that we would do the interviews, or that I would do the interviews. But those interviews and talking to all the press, answering so many countless questions, some good, some bad, some sort of in the middle, was the therapy that I needed to move forward from September 11th, because it's important to talk about things like this. It's important to get your mind around them, and it is possible to do. So for me, the media really helped a lot. It's sort of ironic to say that, you know, since we pick on the media so much, oftentimes deserved. But for me, it helped a great deal. And then people started calling and saying, "Would you come and talk to us about the lessons to learn from the World Trade Center and other lessons you feel we should know?" And that, by the beginning of 2002, became my career. I decided that selling life and philosophy was a whole lot more rewarding and satisfying and fun than managing a computer hardware sales team and selling computer hardware. So I became a public speaker, and Guide Dogs for the Blind asked if I would move back to California and be their spokesperson, which I did, and that lasted about 6.5 years.
And then our third question, which transitions into what you just said in terms of changing careers and changing your approach to what you're doing. You have an impressive list of companies in many major industries have asked for your insights. For younger professionals hoping to follow in your footsteps, what do you recommend as an approach to getting started and getting out there?
Well, first of all, very quickly, I realized several years ago that we have a whole new generation that never experienced September 11th at all and doesn't have any memory of it. So one of the things I feel is my job in a positive way is to draw people in and make them feel like they were there that day so that they really understand what happened. And I've learned a lot over the years. I learned that good salespeople always have stories to tell, positive, real stories, but they have to relate to people. So as a public speaker, that's what I do. When I am approached by people who say, "Gee, I'm interested in speaking and so on, and what do I do?" I will talk with them, and I urge them to find local Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, Elks clubs, and so on. They don't pay for speakers, but it's a great place to practice. Try to record your speech and listen to what you record. I used to say I'm my own worst critic, And listening is one of the ways I learned from that. What I've realized over the last year, that's the wrong thing to say. I am my own best teacher, and listening to every recording that I do gives me the opportunity to learn. And I always learn from listening to myself. And so I want to do that. And I encourage people who haven't been speakers to do that. I encourage people to find stories, find ways to relate to audiences, learn about your audience when you're going to go to speak. Like I said, with Rotary clubs and so on, there's a lot of interest in business and so on. So there are a lot of things to do. But relate to your audience, monitor your audience. Don't lock yourself into a specific speech to the point where all you do is deliver that speech. I've seen some really boring speeches in my life, and all they're doing is reading information off of slides that they put up. I don't do that. I don't use slides at all, very deliberately. And I also customize every talk that I give because I believe that it's important to relate to the audience and do that by understanding from the event sponsor what they're looking for. I was approached a few months ago to speak at an event this past Tuesday, and originally I thought that it was just going to be about the World Trade Center story, but they had a specific issue that they wanted addressed because they were dealing with some legislative issues, and I had an opportunity in talking with them initially to talk about some things I'd done with the legislature in Massachusetts, and they said, would you tell us some of those stories? Well, so I went down there. It was actually in San Marcos, Texas. And on Tuesday, I delivered my speech. And then they had another session where they wanted to teach their audiences about legislatures, how to deal with the legislature. And they said, usually it's like pulling teeth to get people to go to that because they're afraid to talk to their state and congressional representatives and so on. They said, this is the first time, and it's after you spoke, that the room was totally packed and there was nobody in the other breakout sessions. So I guess I did something right to show them why it's important. And the legislators mostly are as human as they are, and they just really want to hear, and you have to relate to them. So it was great, and I very much enjoyed it and had a great time giving that speech. And I have others coming up. And, you know, for anyone who's looking for a keynote speaker to inspire and teach, I'm available to do that. And, you know, people are welcome to reach out to me at michaelhingson.com, but it is what I do. And I will customize every talk that I give. And when we agree on a speaking fee, I don't limit myself to one talk if they want me to do more than one breakout sessions or whatever. My job is to do whatever the event sponsor needs me to do. I'm a guest when I go there, and I'm not a prima donna or anything like that. And my job is to inspire, to teach, to motivate, and to help people learn how to deal with things that we face today.
Michael Hingson, you are a wonderful guest, and this is a fantastic story. We very much appreciate your time today. And are your books, you've got 2 books out then, Thunderdog and Live Like a Guide Dog. Are those both on Amazon?
They are. Thunderdog, the true story of a blind man and his guide dog about and the triumph of trust at ground zero. The second book actually I wrote, which we haven't mentioned, is Running with Roselle, which was a children's book, but more adults buy it. It talks about really growing up and Roselle growing up and how we met and so on. That was published through Amazon. Thunderdog was published by Thomas Nelson, which is now part of HarperCollins. And then in August of this year, Live Like a Guide Dog, the true story, it's Live Like a Guide Dog, stories from a blind man and his dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and moving forward in faith, was published by Tyndale House, and it is available, like Thunderdog, anywhere books are available. So hopefully people will buy them. If you do buy it and read it, I sure hope that you'll give us a wonderful review on Amazon, because those reviews are important to us. But they're available. And when I travel to speak anywhere, if people will allow me to or want me to, I will bring the books and we make them available. And of course, I sign every book that we do sell there. But it's fun. Speaking is enjoyable. I have never regretted making the change, and I really love having the opportunity to help teach people. And it also teaches people about blindness and that we're just human like everyone else.
U.S. forces shift strategy in matching up with China in the Pacific. As a son of a career member of the military, I'm so disappointed with our current military leadership. I see things going on and I wonder who is running the show. There's no room for woke in the military. There is no room for AWOL leaders and out-of-date plans and equipment. Every American who attended at least high school knows about Pearl Harbor. The American Navy, under the direction of then flawed President Franklin Roosevelt, parked its main Pacific Fleet assets in a harbor with a narrow opening. This is what made the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor so devastating in December of 1941. Given this extraordinary tragedy, I would think that any future military leadership would spread out key assets, especially with the very real threat from the whack job running China and the junior whack job running North Korea. Well, the Pentagon just announced that they figured this out and will diversify the location of assets to make it harder for China to hit a lot of assets at one time. Like I said, why would they have allowed assets to be consolidated up to now? How incompetent are they? The U.S. Air Force has called the shift in strategy Agile Combat Employment, or ACE, according to an article in the Wall Street Journal. They are looking at locating assets in more remote places. Of course, when assets are spread out, communication could be a little bit more of a challenge. Well, this is great. Of course, I have been advocating that we substantially invest in nuclear subs, since that is the ultimate diverse and hidden asset. The FTC also announced additional good news for consumers, a crackdown on fake reviews and testimonials. I do check things out online like restaurant and product reviews, so this is something I feel would be very helpful to consumers. FTC Chair Lena Khan stated fake reviews not only waste people's time and money, but also pollute the marketplace and divert business away from honest competitors. By strengthening the FTC's toolkit to fight deceptive advertising, the final rule will protect Americans from getting cheated, put businesses that unlawfully game the system on notice, and promote markets that are fair, honest, and competitive. This rule should take effect in 60 days. The final rule prohibits totally fake reviews like using AI, but it also restricts user insider information to post reviews and other approaches that present reviews that are not really genuine. For insiders, the business would need to disclose their relationship to the business. I personally know of several cases where businesses would reward customers with free services or merchandise if they posted a positive review. It would seem that this rule is broad enough to prohibit that type of solicitation. A special interest to me is the prohibition of threats or of removing negative reviews. I had a surprise when several years ago, I posted a restaurant review that I thought was anonymous, and it resulted in a personal attack from the restaurant manager. When I was attacked, despite providing honest feedback, I made sure personally that my friends knew which restaurant and what had happened. But it was still an ugly incident. And I'm still surprised the manager didn't call me up and say, hey, look, we're sorry you had a disappointing experience. We hope you'll come back. We're going to try and do better. This manager was all about, must have been your fault, not ours. Oh, well. The rule also restricts setting up fake social media accounts or using fake accounts to set up by others. Too soon to see if this will help consumers, but certainly I hope so. In certainly some unwelcome news, the Wall Street Journal reports that Chinese hackers breached the U.S. court wiretap systems. This stunning report claims that the Chinese hackers accessed the networks of the U.S. broadband providers, including Verizon Communications, AT&T, and Lumen Technologies. Garnered from the systems were information that the federal government uses for court-authorized wiretapping. Of course, the Foreign Ministry of Red China, the biggest bunch of liars in the world, other than the U.S. Democrat Party, of course, claimed that this was a false narrative. America must do better to harden its computer infrastructure. It must be the best in the universe. The survival of our country depends on it. Some more bad news. I mentioned in a previous Saving America that Franchise Group Incorporated filed for bankruptcy, and at least for now, 3 of their brands, the Vitamin Shoppe, Pet Supplies Plus and Buddy's Home Furnishings are expected to continue with business, at least at the moment. However, a fourth brand, American Freight, has announced they will be closing all 328 of their locations, and apparently liquidation sales are going on now. Former Marine prosecuted in New York City for defending subway passengers from a crazed person with a long criminal record. I cannot make up this sad headline, but after all, it is New York City, once the star of America, now site of gangs running through famed Times Square. So you have Jordan Neely, who has previously committed violence in the subway system and has been arrested 40 times, causing mayhem in a subway car in May 2023. Penny encounters Neely on a New York City subway. Neely was acting erratically and threatening passengers. Witnesses have testified that Neely said, "Someone is going to die today." So Penny and two others restrained Neely until he settled down, maybe a little too settled, as the claim is that he died from compression to his neck. Prosecutors have charged Penny with a second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. One take on this sad situation is that Neely is black and Penny is white. Question if the skin colors were reversed, would this has even made the news at all? Is this equal justice? I believe in Texas we would have given Penny a medal. As we grow up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we are in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities, and the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. A grade for a hero reporter. This is Dr. David D. Schein, and welcome to a special Saving America episode where I award a richly deserved A grade to a politician, so-called celebrity, or other person who ends up in the public eye. As my regular audience members know, I award a lot more F grades than A grades. It's so much more fun when the story has a happy ending. During a live Fox weather broadcast, Bob Van Dillen, a meteorologist for the Atlanta station, is outside in waist-deep water telling people about the flooding situation due to Hurricane Helene. Behind him, a woman is in a flooded car. She has the window down. He calls 911 for her. However, she starts to panic. Van Dillen tells his cameraman to take a break, walks to the car, and then takes the woman to safety on his back. Van Dillen has many years as a meteorologist and is a member of the American Meteorological Society. Therefore, Saving America awards Bob Van Dillen, the weatherman for Fox Weather in Atlanta, the coveted Saving America A grade for quick and heroic action. Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. A former top aide of New York Governor Hochul charged with spying for Beijing. Throughout the United States recently, there have been troubling reports of both military and government operations that have been infiltrated by persons spying for Communist China. This report is just the latest, but still concerning. While there's been wide media coverage, Politico had some stunning details in a recent piece. I've also personally reviewed the 64-page federal indictment that was just unsealed. Linda's son worked in various positions in New York Governors Cuomo and Hochul's administrations. She and her husband, Chris Hu, were arrested on September 3rd at their home on Long Island. They were charged with spying for the CCP, Communist Party. She was also charged with visa fraud, alien smuggling, and conspiracy to commit money laundering, while her husband, Hu, was charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering, bank fraud, and misuse of means of identification. The CCP apparently pays well, as they had a $3.6 million home in Manhasset, New York, as well as a nearly $2 million vacation getaway in Hawaii. In addition, the article from Politico details their luxury lifestyle. In return, the indictment alleges Sun promoted New York government's relationship with Communist China. At the same time, she actively prevented improved relations between the Taiwanese government and the New York governor's office. Some of her misdeeds against Taiwan included preventing a Cuomo press release referring to Taiwan as a country, stopped Cuomo's administration from acknowledging a donation of personal protection equipment from Taiwan during the COVID crisis, and blocked meetings and phone calls between Taiwanese officials and New York political administrators. It is indicated in the indictment that she even let Chinese officials listen in on government meetings. Sun and Hu have pleaded not guilty. Sun was released on $1.5 million bond, and she's barred from any contact with the Chinese government. In the meantime, the New York governor's office released this statement. We terminated her employment in March 2023 after discovering evidence of misconduct, immediately reported her actions to law enforcement, and have assisted law enforcement throughout this process. While this is a positive response, of course, this is still a black mark on both recent governor's administrations in the state of New York. We in the United States must increase our awareness of this type of interference and spying in both the public and private sectors. Over 500,000 claims filed over Camp Lejeune contaminated water. Anyone who watches television has probably seen an ad seeking clients who would want to pursue a claim under the unusual pitch that they could be sick due to the contaminated water at a famous U.S. Marine training base. That base is Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. The trigger is a law called the Camp Lejeune Justice Act, or CLJA. The law allows people previously exposed to contaminated water at Camp Lejeune to file a new claim with the U.S. Navy. The deadline of August 10th, 2024 has just passed. The time period for exposure is August 1st, 1953 to December 31st, 1987. Claimants would need to have stayed at Camp Lejeune during this period for at least 30 days. It is estimated that this could cover 1 million people. The claimants must have a diagnosis of one or more of these presumptive conditions, presumptive meaning that it's assumed that they were related to their exposure at Camp Lejeune's water. Bladder cancer, breast cancer, esophageal cancer, female infertility, hepatic stenosis, kidney cancer, leukemia, lung cancer, miscarriages, multiple myeloma, myeloplastic syndromes, neurobehavior effects, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, renal toxicity, and scleroderma. My concern as a taxpayer is that this is such a long list. It could include many who are experiencing these conditions, but not due to the bad water at the camp. In fact, 546,000 claims have already been filed under this act. More than $21 billion is expected in payouts, and some families could receive settlements ranging from $25,000 to $1 million, depending on the severity of the harm from the toxic water, length of exposure, and other factors. Despite reaching the end of the filing period, resolving such a large number of claims will likely take years. In fact, I stayed briefly twice at that base during the period covered by the law. Fortunately, I'm not suffering from one of the covered illnesses, and in fact was not there for a combination of 30 days that would not be eligible. A Fourth Circuit decision sets up the next potential Second Amendment showdown at the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit ruled in August to uphold Maryland's ban on what its law labels assault weapons. The case is Bianchi versus Brown, where Maryland residents are challenging the constitutionality of a 2013 Maryland law that prohibits them from buying or possessing any firearm deemed an assault weapon. That has not been modified pursuant to state law. In other words, an assault weapon, but if it's modified a certain way, it does meet Maryland law. So we're talking about non-modified so-called assault weapons. According to an article in the Daily Signal, the law in question defines assault weapon to include hundreds of specific models of semi-automatic rifles, as well as any other semi-automatic rifle that either one has a fixed magazine capable of holding more than 10 rounds, has an overall length shorter than 29 inches or has both a detachable magazine and at least two of the following three features: a folding stock, flash suppressor, or grenade or flare launcher. The article goes on to explain that semi-automatic rifles aren't outright prohibited, but Maryland residents are required to buy heavily modified, featureless versions of those guns. The plaintiffs in this case argued that this prohibition on owning virtually all of the most popular semi-automatic rifles in the nation violates the Second Amendment. This ruling is notable since other courts have been holding that anything less than a machine gun, which are banned by federal law since the 1930s, is not prohibited under the Second Amendment. Court rulings have generally held that usual weapons are acceptable, but not highly unusual ones. That, of course, requires some interpretation. The idea of the defenders of what are referred to as AR-15 style weapons is that they are quite common, and they have not been used frequently in the commission of crimes. In contrast, the Fourth Circuit ruled that the Maryland law was only banning military-style weapons designed for sustained combat operations that are ill-suited and disproportionate to the need for self-defense, so that the law helps by regulating excessively dangerous weapons once their incompatibility with a lawful and safe society becomes apparent. However, this is largely at odds with a number of other court rulings around the country and by SCOTUS. Therefore, this is likely to be the next major Second Amendment showdown at the Supreme Court. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I'm sure that you'll agree that he deserves the moniker of an interesting person. Saving America welcomes Eric M. Walwent, and who, after losing 3 jobs, bought his first rental property with the last of his money. In the next 2 years, he and his wife rehabbed, rented, and refinanced 20 units to become financially free by the time he was only 30. Since then, they have rehabbed and repositioned over 1,000 more units. They have consolidated their various coaching and other activities under Clear Sky Training Limited. He and his family have 4 best-selling books and own and operate multiple businesses. They do this and still spend half their time traveling and speaking all over the world. Using what he teaches, both of his kids started buying real estate when they were 7 years old without their parents' money or credit. Eric and his family host the Real Power Family radio program, which is on the Brushwood Media Network. Their most recent book is Family Success Triangle, Be, Do, Have. We had to shorten this bio so we'd have time for the interview itself. We welcome Eric M. Walwent for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schein. It is a pleasure to be here.
And it's a pleasure to have you over here. As you know, we ask our guests 3 questions. So the first one is, so many people face tough challenges like losing 3 jobs in a row, and then they just give up. What made you different? Why? And also, why real estate versus some other form of business?
When I graduated at 17, did a year of college, and then joined the Army so I could pay for college. It was always beat into me that you have to do this. And we didn't look at the ROI of actually getting a degree. I just blindly went where my parents had taught me my whole life to go. After that, I realized, man, this is hard. I got to pay for this. I can't even get enough loans, and I'm working 3 jobs. I never considered giving up. So I joined the Army, did 4 years active duty, ended up 13 years total. And in that time frame, I was a platoon sergeant. I was a medic in the Army. I was treating people. I had 40 guys working for me. I had 12 ambulance squads that were running 24 hours a day. And the bottom line is, as a platoon sergeant, if I made bad decisions, people could die. As a medic, if I made bad decisions, people could die. So you ask, how did I go and not give up? I never considered giving up. It didn't matter what happened. Most of my adult life at that point in time, if I made a bad decision or if I just gave up, people would die. And so I just never gave up. I don't know how to give up. Even today, I can't imagine walking away and giving up from something.
Well, it's pretty fascinating. But the second part of my question is why real estate once you got into your own business versus something else?
That is not a simple question. I knew how to work with my hands. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yes.
Right before I lost my last job, I decided to buy my first rental property. And about the same time as I got fired, I got it rented. So I finally got my first check, and definitely not two before I lost that job. But it wasn't enough to make the payment on having another vacant house. I couldn't even make the payment on my own house. And I'm counting on people paying rent, and my wife is making $8.50 an hour. So there's no way we're living off of that. And I just decided, you know what? If we're going to do this, I've lost 3 jobs in 2 years, and each one I immediately came back. I got a better job paying me twice as much money, give or take, within a few weeks of losing the one before that. And I just decided I'm done. I'm not going to get another job ever. I am going to start my own business. It is going to be, involve real estate. And I would just like to buy houses, fix them up, and rent them out. And that has evolved into 18 different businesses, including multiple holding companies, a construction company, a real estate brokerage, a little bit of lending, and a bunch of training companies, multiple books, a radio show. But it all stems from that first decision of trying to create a better life for my family. And I just happen to choose real estate as the vehicle to do it.
Well, that's a fantastic story, and I'm sure it'll inspire our audience. And our second question is your current book is Family Success Triangle Be, Do, Have. Share with our audience how this book will help them with raising their children, which I thought was kind of an interesting approach.
As I said, as a sergeant in the Army, I had plenty of people working for me, and I took care of them. Frequently, they were older than me. I got promoted very rapidly. And yet, it's kind of like raising kids or taking care of, protecting your children. You want to push them, you have to get the job done. And at the same time, you want to put them in as little harm as possible or in the way. And that's not always easy in the jobs that we did. I mean, I was an airborne sapper, jumped out of airplanes, blew stuff up. So not everything is, quote, safe. You're not ever secure. And here I go on a tangent. I always do this. Could you tell me the question again?
Sure. And we want you to talk about your current book because
The book. Yeah,
talked
sorry
about
about
how
that.
that fits in with raising kids, which I thought was an interesting approach. Okay.
After leading troops in the Army and then starting businesses and hiring people, I looked after these people the same way I did in the Army. And then I finally had children last. And there's very little difference. If you can be a good leader, you can be a good father. And I know my kids will probably say I'm a little bit too militant, a little bit too much of a drill sergeant, and that may be. And they get incredibly good results. I mean, they're right now, as we record this, they're recording their own radio show that'll go out to millions of people without any adults. It's just the two teenagers talking. So I have instilled good values in them. And the most important of those values, I wrote my perception of what that should be in my book, Family Success Triangle. And then the second half of the chapter, my wife wrote her perception of what it should be. And you can see sometimes we're completely aligned and sometimes we're way off base. We come in wildly different, but we all have the same basic morals and ethics. And that's what we taught our children. That's what I put into my book. And it really doesn't matter if you're running a business, if you have trouble with employees, or if you're a sergeant in the Army, or just a father or a mother. The same basic principles can guide you through everything. That's why I wrote the book, Family Success Triangle.
Sounds great. And speaking of radio shows, our third question is you've got your whole family doing a program on Brushwood called Real Power Family Radio Show. Tell us a little bit about that show and what are you trying to do for your audience?
I'm trying to make their world a better place. Every single day we end with use what you learned here today to make the world a better place. From the time my first son, Devin, was born, I think the first couple of weeks of his life, I told him, I want you, go out and change the world. And then I realized there's very bad people in the world that change it for the worse. So I changed what I was saying because I think words have power. They're very important to use exactly the right word. That is the problem with the governments and the media today. They're changing the definitions of words. So when I say something, I am very specific. And I told Devin, go out. I want you to go to sleep. I love you. And I want you to dream about making the world a better place. And I have said that to him for 17 and a half years of his life. And the 14 or 15-year-old, at least in a couple of weeks, he'll be 15. I've said it every night of his life. I love you. I want you to go to sleep and dream about making the world a better place. That is what I want to do, not just for our family, not just for my city or state or even the America. I want to give the information that people need to make the world better. I want them to step back and see and not be controlled by emotions and especially not fear. I want them to form a good, hopefully a family unit, or you get your tribe together, whatever that tribe, whatever that group is, and you help each other. And that will make everybody's world better. And when you get good at that and you have a nice, strong family or a strong group of people, then take it to the next level and help the next level to get bigger. And I find that writing books and having my own radio show is the best way to do these things and reach the most amount of people.
Well, that's fascinating. And of course, it makes you a perfect interview for Saving America, because part of our objective is to make America better. And I think if we make America better, that will help to make the world better. How can our audience get more information about you, your family, and your various activities? Where's the best places to look?
I am the father of the Real Power Family. You can type Real Power Family anywhere. We're on the Brushwood Media Network. We're on YouTube. I think we're on TikTok, Facebook. If you type it in, my name, Eric M. Woolman, on LinkedIn, I'm there. And we all have our own X accounts and LinkedIn accounts. But just Real Power Family. It's always about the family. It's not just me. It's not just my wife. It is about the group working together that makes us all stronger.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Eric M. Woolman. In a story from multiple sources, including Reuters, the U.S. approved a $2 billion arms sale to Taiwan. Included in the package are anti-missile defense systems that have been tested out in Ukraine fairly recently. Apparently, despite the protests from the CCP, Taiwan is entitled to get defensive weapons from the United States. As many of my audience know, my position is that the history documents that the only legitimate government of China is the one in Taiwan. So anytime the CCP wants to turn over operation of the mainland to the government of Taiwan, I'm prepared to support unification. However, I will never support it in the other direction. Communism has never worked throughout the world. Why impose it on our ally, Taiwan? New Oregon law, a threat to sensibility. In a sad commentary on the deranged leftist model, Oregon has a law to go into effect on January 1, which forces health insurers authorized in the state to cover transgenital surgeries and hormones for children, or risk losing their insurance licenses. Oregon's new rule also requires insurers to, get this, contract with enough gender doctors to prevent long wait lines. As with my prior disclaimers, I'm not opposed to adults with proper counseling deciding to have gender reassignment surgery. However, I also note that unhappy people who think they'll be happier as the other gender are usually still unhappy. Those are the statistics, folks. That's not just my opinion. But I go ballistic when children who are still finding their way are mutilated. In many cases, these surgeries are not reversible. This bizarre rule from Oregon's Department of Consumer and Business Services relies on the latest standards of care developed, get this group, World Professional Association for Transgender Health. This clown show operation refers to this treatment as medically necessary to justify expanding insurance coverage. Given the poor track record for adults, I do not support any insurance coverage for patients at any age. If some adults want to try this out, use their own money. Remember, health insurance is a shared expense model. If this money is spent by the insurance companies, everyone with health insurance will be paying for it. For about a decade, the government agencies that are supposed to protect every American seem to be favoring parties who are on the Democrat side of certain laws. This is clearly a violation of the American concept of equal protection under the law. Today, I'm focusing on the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, or FACE Act, which prohibits use of force, obstruction, or property damage intended to interfere with reproductive health care services. Under the letter of the law, FACE is supposed to protect access to both abortion clinics and parenting centers. Typical of the lawfare against Trump and many of his associates, the Department of Justice under the Biden-Harris administration has used an anti-conspiracy law and the FACE Act to go after pro-life protesters. A recent example was the defacing of a pregnancy support center in Chicago. Right after the DNC entered this Democrat National Convention, the center was found to have vile graffiti painted on it and the locks to the building cemented so access could not be gained. Catholic Vote President Brian Birch told the Daily Signal, this is a pattern of violence that the Department of Justice has continued to ignore and instead is focused on hunting down pro-life advocates. He added, this is a further demonstration of the radical and extreme position of the Democrat activists who are not content merely to debate the question of abortion or are willing to use destruction and violence. There have been at least 400 other attacks against pregnancy resource centers and church facilities, not including the one above. This is since Roe v. Wade was overturned 2 years ago, according to Catholic Vote. In a separate Saving America, I have noted that prison terms have been sought for peaceful protests outside of abortion clinics. But Merrick Garland's Department of Justice has not taken action against these violent pro-abortion protesters. I again remind him that the law of the U.S. is equal protection under the law. I condemn violence by either side to accomplish political objectives. More fun than a barrel of monkeys. A South Carolina lab recaptures 30 escaped monkeys as of this recording, but hey, 13 are still loose. This lab breeds the little rhesus macaw monkeys for medical research purposes. The positive part is they generally hung around in their neighborhood and tend not to be harmful to humans. In fact, they were talking to their buddies who were back in the cages while they were running around on the perimeter of the property. I found it interesting that the batch are all females and weigh about 7 pounds each. Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.